on his way. Devil is on his way. Devil is on his way, motherfucker. Oh, the devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way. Fall to your knees. Devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way.
Mountain Murders is an Appalachian true crime podcast. Some content may not be suitable for all listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
We say fuck a lot.
Hey, y'all. Welcome back to Mountain Murders.
I'm Heather.
And I'm Dylan.
How are you, Dylan?
I'm doing great.
You're doing great.
Oh, yeah.
That's nice.
Is it?
Sure.
How are you, Heather?
I'm refreshed.
Ooh.
I spent a few days at the beach.
You're like one of them Starbucks drinks.
And I got to soak up some sun and sand. Got a little sand in my crack.
You got galded.
I got, a long story. Got covered in bug bites.
Yes,
like
you
the
did.
Only person who walked away with like 15 bug bites. Don't know how that happened.
Painful bug
and
bites.
Got to listen to my dad bitch and complain the whole time. And the most exciting part, Dylan, was watching the man hunt down a fly for over an hour inside the beach house.
Ah, yes.
You said you were in awe of his dadness.
I was, yes. When that's exactly what I texted you back. I was like, what? Yes, sir. I lay my sword at your altar.
It could be like a true crime podcast. He was like stalking the fly. He had his hat in his hand.
Yes.
Just waiting for this fly.
He was waiting for that fly just to slip up for a split second.
It's true. It's true.
He cased the fly. He started getting the fly's routine down somewhere. If he flies away from here, he's going to land there next.
It was
likely.
premeditated.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, that sounds great. But there was a beach there too, right?
There was a beach. No, I had a great time. It was really nice.
Nice. That's
Despite,
awesome.
being around my family, it was still really fun.
And I stayed home and worked.
It's what you deserve.
It's not.
You get the vacation you deserve, Dylan.
That was a staycation, except I was at work.
Exactly.
Okay, so I think we have something funny to talk about before we get into this really cool case that you have cooked up for us.
Well, I don't know if I'd say it's funny.
Well, okay. Poor choice of words.
It's an odd story.
Very.
Right? And it's kind of a fascinating look, I guess, at the law as it's written and how this could come to be. Now, do you want to tell the story, Dylan, or should I?
You should, because I can't read stuff.
Okay, so back in 2019, there was a phone store robbery in New York City that led to a friendly fire death of a New York police detective named Brian Simonson. I think his name is Jagger Freeman. He's 28. He was found guilty of 13 out of 14 counts, including felony murder and robbery. He was convicted back in June, but we're just kind of just now like learning about the story, and we were blown away by it. So what happened was this guy, Freeman, was sitting outside. He was the lookout for his friend, knucklehead friend, robbing the store. Right?
Yeah. So I mean,
they didn't have real guns.
No, his dumbass friend is in the store with a fake gun, holding up the employees. Right.
Right.
And he's in the car. He's the lookout. I'm gonna hit the horn if I see anything.
His buddy was a guy named Christopher Ransom. He brandished a fake gun inside this T-Mobile store and was demanding that the employees fork over cash and merchandise from a back room. As this Freeman fella is sitting outside, some cops pull up, right? And one of the cops unleashes about 42 bullets that left the detective this other detective wounded. So the two cops are in like a firefight.
So between the two cops, they expended 42 rounds.
Yes.
And they were the only two shooting.
That seems to be the case because the two criminals didn't actually have guns, real guns. Christopher Ransom, the fellow who was inside the store committing the crime, the shitbird, he was actually shot 8 times during this.
Oh my God.
But he survived, right?
Okay.
But this detective Simonson, who was a 19-year vet of the department, perished. He was struck in the chest, died that night. Now, these two criminals have been charged with murder
What?
and convicted.
Now, first of all, I should say you shouldn't rob places, and it's really dumb. And many states do have a law that it basically, if you're committing a felony or, you know, something like this robbery or set someone up to be robbed and someone dies, therefore you can be charged with murder. Okay, I get all that.
So, though neither one pulled the trigger, Freeman and his accomplice, Christopher Ransom, were each charged with murder back in February of 2019 under a state law that allows for the count if a death is caused during the commission of a felony. Now, both men initially pleaded not guilty. Then Ransom cooperated and pled to aggravated manslaughter, and he received 33 years in prison for the crime. This other gentleman, Freeman, now he was convicted, and as he was being taken out of the courtroom, he's yelling, "For murder, though, I didn't do shit."
So this is Freeman was convicted of murder.
They both were
Right.
The one guy copped to
Manslaughter.
the aggravated manslaughter, but Freeman was convicted of murder.
So the guy who did the least in this crime, he's the guy out in the car, right? Caught the heaviest charge.
It's a wild story, Dylan.
Now, here's the thing. And I said funny earlier. It's not funny. It's tragic. A man lost his life. 4 lives ruined. Post-traumatic for everybody. I mean, it's just horrible. The employees. I mean, my God, it sounds like the whole damn place was shot up. Here's my thing. At what point is there no point that these two officers realize they're the only two shooting? They were the only two shooting. I know it's a firefight. I know it's real life. It's not like in the movies, all cool and particular. It's crazy. If you've ever seen video of firefights in real life, they're very chaotic. No one, you know, it's not, like I said, it's not like the movies. You're picking your shot and you know exactly where it goes. People are just blasting off. People are scared to death for, you know, getting killed. But, I mean,
We've all seen Full Metal Jacket.
my God, that's the kooky part to me, is the cops was the only two unloading. No one else had a weapon.
It's just a very unusual story. And I'm actually surprised that these two fellas were charged with the murder, especially the guy who was in the car and didn't even take part in the robbery.
No, he didn't show anyone a weapon or didn't scare anyone, didn't rob anyone. But, I mean, I guess it goes to show you shouldn't be taking any kind of part of something like this. But the way it all washed out, it seems that he got the worst end of the stick in the end and he did the least. So, I don't know.
Well, you know, Dylan, they say you play dumb games, you win dumb prizes.
Yeah, that's true. And I feel
But
sorry
it does seem like a bit of a stiff sentence.
I do feel sorry for that officer's family. You know, he lost
he left
lost
behind
his
wife
life.
and was a 19-year veteran of the department. So,
But we really need to figure out how, I mean, were they behind defensive positions? Was this like set up like something you'd see in a video game? How can you not just see the other cops over there and he's the one popping off at you? He was shot by another cop. Let's just be honest.
He was, and I don't know how we allow the Wild West to go on with these officers, and they don't seem to get any slap on the wrist for their behavior, but will sock it to someone who didn't even have a weapon. I don't know. It's tricky, but it's an interesting story. It is a bit older. It took place a while back. The sentencing happened in June, but we just learned about it earlier today, and we're blown away by the details.
Yeah, we were. We see a lot of stories. We read a lot of stuff. Heather does especially, and I see plenty myself as far as just articles popping up here and there. And the circumstances struck me as very odd in this case. And it's sad for everyone involved, especially the officer who lost his life.
Dylan, it is the month of August, and we are spending the whole month in Maryland.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I don't think we've ever done a whole lot of time in Maryland.
We've had a few cases we've covered out of Maryland, but we're going to be spending the whole month there. I have got some wonderful cases mapped out. It's going to be an exciting couple of weeks.
Now, you said this was kind of a wild, crazy ride here, this story.
It is.
And it's a long ride, so I think we better get started.
Are you ready?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay. Nancy Jean Schweitzer was born March 30th of 1948 in Baltimore, Maryland, to parents Jimmy, his real name was James, but of course Jimmy was the nickname, who had served in World War II. Jimmy was the fourth of 9 children, and he lost his father at a young age. Jimmy had tried to help support his family from a very early age, and the family was very poor during the Great Depression. So poor, in fact, they didn't even own a radio, which was a household staple during the 1930s. Like, no matter how poor and destitute most families were at this time, you had a radio.
Well, and the modern equivalent, I would say, is a TV. Even people who barely have, 2 pennies to rub together have some small television in their house, some way to turn it on.
By 1937, he was working as an oil burner in the shipyards, which was very dirty work, but at least it was work. During the war, Jimmy married an English woman, and together they had a daughter. The marriage didn't last, though. He never divorced his English bride, and she took their child and returned to the United Kingdom a year later after they were wed. In 1947, Jimmy had met another woman named Doris Leary. Though they didn't marry, Jimmy and Doris had Nancy in 1948 and another daughter, Doris Jr., in 1950.
Doris Jr.?
Well, yeah.
Interesting.
Well, I mean, you could have a son, and why couldn't a daughter be a junior?
Yeah, well, I guess I can. I've actually never even contemplated that.
What's the difference?
There is none.
You're being sexist.
I'm not being sexist.
Maybe I'm going to have 4 kids, and they're all going to be named Heather, like
How many
George Foreman.
female juniors have you ever heard of in your life?
Actually, a couple.
Really?
Yeah. Well,
Oh.
I mean, I've known women who were named after their mothers or grandmothers. So, yeah, I think technically they're a junior, Dylan. Okay. So, in the early part of the 1950s, Jimmy and Doris permanently split, and he took custody of Nancy. They moved in with his mother, known around the neighborhood of Fells Point as Lil, along with his sister Elizabeth. They're all living in this apartment together. Nancy had almost no contact at all with her biological mother after the separation. Lil ran a tavern in Fells Point, which catered to blue-collar workers from Italian, German, Jewish, and Polish backgrounds, men who mostly worked in the shipyards, and a few bookies and loan sharks were hanging around. Sounds like a fun spot.
It does.
Right? In Fells Point, at the time, everybody was scratching to get by, and everybody was on the bottom of the economic ladder. And Jimmy liked to gamble, which was common at the time. Bets on the Orioles, the Colts, now the Ravens, or the horses at Pimlico. He never placed huge bets, but when he won money, Jimmy was happy as a clam. Then one night in 1964, he was walking home from the tavern through an alleyway when he got jumped by 2 guys. He was beaten senseless and a few days later died from a blood clot in the brain.
Oh, God.
Nancy was only 16. Despite the tragedy, Nancy was on a local television show called The Buddy Dean Show, where teenagers danced in front of the camera like American Bandstand. So think John Waters' Hairspray.
Oh, okay.
And John Waters is from Baltimore. All of those Baltimore films are on location in and around Fells Point.
So he would likely have been exposed to this very dance show.
He definitely would. So if you've seen the movie Hairspray, then you know the Corny Collins show is probably very much based on the Buddy Dean show. Nancy had a boyfriend who was also her frequent dance partner. His name was Ted Geisendeffer. She was on the committee, which was a group of kids who helped Bobby Dean decide which songs were hot and who got to be star dancer. I mean, this is seriously Hairspray.
Oh, my gosh. That's funny.
Right? Nancy was petite, around 5 feet tall, barely 100 pounds, with blonde hair and blue eyes. So not only was she gorgeous, but she was like a regular con artist. Nancy knew exactly how to manipulate people, sense what they wanted or needed, and she could be that person. She compartmentalized herself so well, no one knew Nancy's act. Beneath her charming exterior was a young woman who knew survival as a top priority. She knew what she wanted, and she knew how to get it. No one was going to hand Nancy anything on a platter, and she knew that.
So she's going to take it.
She's going to take it. And she's kind of learned through this hard Scrabble life in Fells Point, spending time around her grandma's tavern.
Well, yeah, she's seen all kinds of gambling.
Bookies, loan sharks.
She's heard stories, people telling stories of what they're doing.
She's super pretty, and she's using that to her advantage. At 19, Nancy married Charles Kucharski.
These last names.
Described as well-built and handsome, Charles was also a hard worker who would establish himself as a contractor. Even an artist in a way, he renovated older homes. In the 1970s, Nancy and Charles would have 2 daughters, Jennifer and Amanda. Life throughout the 70s was great. At least Charles thought so. Then after nearly 20 years of marriage, in 1982, Charles learned a dark secret that Nancy had been keeping.
Do tell.
She had a gambling problem. Nancy had been taking secret trips to Atlantic City during the day while Charles was at work and the girls were at school. It was only a 2-hour trip to get up to Atlantic City and back to Baltimore. And she was doing this on the daily. Nancy had become addicted to slot machines and video poker, which was kind of the new thing.
So she would shoot up there, gamble half the day, shoot home right before the kids got out of school.
Yeah.
Wow.
Charles only learned of his wife's habit when the IRS came knocking, wanting nearly $60,000 in taxes on money that Nancy had won at casinos.
Holy cow, she had been winning too, though.
There was also the matter of other debts. Around $40,000 she had spent on credit cards. She had opened in her husband's name without his knowledge. So a lot of times with these credit cards, she was getting like a cash advance and using that money to gamble.
Oh my gosh.
So she's won around $60,000, or, she owes this money. But imagine what she's lost in order to win this. She's lost a lot.
Yeah, and then you're taking that cash, and now that's under, getting an interest rate applied to your cash amount. I mean, it's not good. And if you're going that frequently, we all know the house always wins. You're not going to come out on top.
Nancy had been doing Charles's bookkeeping for years, and he had no idea of their finances, like for the family or his business. Nancy was rationalizing the deception by thinking she could win big, replace the money, and no one would be wiser.
Which is a common theme with the gamblers, I think. I've never been, that's not my thing. I've had issues with other things, but not gambling. But I think that's a common, if I can only that one big score, and I'll be done. I can fix everything.
I have a relative in my immediate family who has a gambling addiction.
It's just as devastating as any other addiction.
And the amount of money that has gone into video poker machines at gas stations and such is ridiculous.
I mean, even when we go in the casino, like I said, this doesn't grab me, fortunately for me.
I'm too cheap.
We go in a casino and we just have a drink or two and we play, $40, $60 is usually our limit. And just people watch. It's fun. You'll see people being goofy, having fun, but you also see a lot of sad people that are just, you can see the desperation on their face.
Just feeding the machine.
Just feeding it. And you're just like, wow, that's not fun. What are you doing? But I'm sure it's no different than, someone having an issue with substance and people watching them like, why are you acting like that? But it is it's sad. And it devastates people's lives. And I think the thing with gambling is it kind of snowballs some way maybe faster than some other addictions into your finances and gets up into these large, huge amounts of money in debt that are just kind of hanging around your neck. So it's very scary.
Nancy had been dumping large sums of her husband's money into these video poker machines. Charles tried to keep up with the bills, pay off the tax debt, but his marriage was falling apart. He felt betrayed. I mean, how could he not feel betrayed, right? His thought was, how could Nancy keep this secret from me? It wasn't so much about the money as the secrecy. And if his wife lied about this, what else could she be lying about? About 2 years later, in 1984, the marriage dissolved altogether. Nancy moved on from the marriage and back into a relationship with her high school sweetheart, Ted, who worked in asbestos removal, despite the fact that he was married with children.
Yeah, she doesn't care, it seems.
Soon, Ted was divorcing his wife to be with Nancy. On February 8th of 1985, the pair were married. From the start, their relationship was doomed. Both seemed to have ideas of what the other was like based on how they had been 2 decades earlier when they were teenagers. Ted was caught up in a romantic illusion of Nancy, but they were vastly different. He couldn't stand the thought of owing anybody money and was organized, and he liked to plan everything out in advance. But somehow Nancy talked him into letting her control the finances. So while he is out busting ass every day removing toxic substances from buildings, she's in Atlantic City spending money. Not a good situation.
It's the same thing. She's doing the same thing with someone else. And I guarantee you they're not properly handling that asbestos during this point, even if they do know it's toxic. The whole history of asbestos is scary in this country.
Okay.
He's about to get that mesothelioma up this bitch.
Nancy had credit cards in Ted's name, again, without his knowledge. Nancy started staying away for days at a time. Ted had no idea where she was, but suspected Nancy was having affairs. And she was. She was having affairs. And gambling away all their money. In 1991, Nancy met a woman named Linda Mayberry who operated an escort service that catered to high-end clientele. She kept an apartment where the sex workers entertained men anywhere from about $150 an hour and up. $40 of that went to Linda. So you have to pay the house, right? Nancy went to work for her. Nancy's favorite customers were wealthy, middle-aged Jewish men. The extra cash went directly into to the poker machines.
Oh, the irony.
And Ted was oblivious. So his wife is working as an escort, blowing all the money gambling, and he has no idea.
So she's feeding poker machines by being a poker machine. No? Nobody? All right, let's go.
Then one day he discovered a bag full of bills stashed behind a washing machine, all unpaid. Now, can you imagine?
No, this is way too much, and she's the master manipulator. And it's just disappearing for days on. That right there would be, I say a deal breaker.
That would be a no for you?
I would never do that to you, and I couldn't imagine you doing that to me. Just disappearing, refusing to, reach out and let me know that you're at least okay. Your mind racing, your imagination thinking of all these things it could be, and some of it may be true, and it's just, it'd be horrible. And it's very, I don't know, it's very disrespectful to your partner, right?
The bag of unpaid bills, to me, that's just such a betrayal.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
I have a friend who thought everything was okay and was, working, busting his ass all week, weekends too, and to keep everything level and paid, and thought everything was, and when it went south, he realized none of it was paid. None of it. The car,
his
the
wife
house,
hadn't paid
everything.
Anything. And
that betrayal, yes, it's very, very, very hateful betrayal. It's just horrible.
Yeah. Can really shake a person and definitely rattle a relationship. Soon, he discovered that Nancy had been signing the mortgage checks over to herself and cashing them. Their home was on the verge of foreclosure. He was fuming mad, especially when he also learned that Nancy had gambled away all the money that Ted had set aside for his daughter's tuition.
My gosh, she's just liquidating everything in sight just to feed her gambling addiction.
The altercation grew violent, with Nancy trying to hit him, and she ended up breaking her wrist. Ted slammed his fist through a picture on the wall. The fights raged on to the point that Ted would lock himself in the closet because he was afraid he might kill Nancy if he got his hands on her. I mean, I just can't even imagine this situation.
Well, Ted, we don't want you to do that, of course. And don't hit anybody. Nobody gets to hit
Well,
anybody.
that's why he's locking himself in the closet. I mean, we got to give him some credit, I guess.
A little bit. But why is Nancy running around trying to hit stuff? Because you did this.
Oh, Nancy's going to be running around doing all kinds of shit.
She's
Dylan.
out of control.
This is just the beginning
Nuh-uh.
of Nancy.
Oh, my God.
Okay, Nancy is unlike anyone we've covered on Mountain Murders podcast.
Oh, wow.
All right? She deserves her own special category of like Queen Supreme Shitbird.
Damn. She's the shitbird queen.
Oh, you hang in there, okay?
Okay.
This is a wild ride, okay? It's like Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. You're going to get wet.
I'm already damp.
You're going to get maybe some chills, definitely some thrills.
Oh.
Yeah, okay.
What, some spills?
Maybe.
Oh, gosh.
Okay. So on February 22nd of 1992, Nancy left the house she shared with Ted in Ellicott City, Maryland, and moved into an apartment with her daughters. She started working full-time for Linda. A few months later, Nancy began seeing a client named Eric Siegel, who was a wealthy Baltimore commercial loan broker. However, it didn't take long for Nancy to get her hooks in Eric, which angered Linda, because she was no longer getting her cut of the money. So Nancy's seeing this guy outside of business hours.
Ah, yes. I think that is. I don't think that's okay. The house is not going to like that.
No sex in the champagne room, Dylan. Eric had experienced tragedy before he met Nancy. In 1991, 41-year-old Eric was driving drunk with his kids in the car when he crashed. His daughter was killed and his son was injured. He was charged with criminal manslaughter, drunk driving, vehicular homicide, speeding, and other traffic violations. Eric's wife left him. Nancy had started attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings while Eric was going to those AA meetings. So the pair did have a few things in common. They were both going to meetings. They were both very frank with each other about their addictions. And while Eric had stopped drinking, Nancy was quickly back to gambling again. Then in early fall, Ted found out Nancy had been gambling when he got a tax bill for $38,000. This time he refuses to pay. And the casino had Nancy's social security number, so the undeclared income was on Nancy. So this time husband's not going to bail her out, and the money's linked to her, so.
Well, it should be.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, really.
She filed for divorce in October of 1992, charging Ted with constructive desertion, saying that Ted had forced her out of the marriage. She wanted the court to give her a portion of the house in Ellicott City and alimony. Ted fired back, citing adultery in the marriage, and countered that she had serious gambling problems. Not only should Nancy get nothing from their real property, but no alimony, and she could pay his legal fees. It was a nasty, contentious divorce battle.
Well, yeah, she's just going to take that money and gamble it away. So, what's the point?
And you know what? Instead of gambling that money away, you should just give it to me.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So if you're thinking about putting money in a slot machine, you're going to lose that money anyway. So why don't you just put it in an envelope, mail it to me, or you can Cash App, Venmo, PayPal me.
Okay.
Right?
She's been practicing.
I will do more constructive things with your finances, with your money.
She's been practicing her financial dominatrix, and I think it's coming along nicely.
Domination.
Dominated, whatever. And so Heather.
It's true. You give me your money, and then I give you an allowance, and I tell you what you're allowed to buy.
Go with Heather, the sure bet. That's what it says on her business card.
Yes. Like you're not allowed to buy beer.
No beer. A little bit of smoky. Put a little something in there, right?
I'm like, you can have some cigarettes.
Oh.
And I will allow you to buy some Taco Bell.
What about some edibles?
Well, we're nowhere near Michigan right now, or California, or any place like that.
Yeah, I know.
You have to get you some of them CBD gummies.
Oh, no, I'm not going to do that. But North Carolina did pass medical marijuana, so we're on the road to recreational use.
So we're going to be a green state soon, is what you're
Yeah,
saying.
in about 15 or 20 years.
When I was at the beach, on every corner was like a smoke vape shop.
CBD,
right?
CBD, Delta
and it
8.
blows my mind that you can get the Delta 8 and Delta 10 now, like the
yeah.
edibles and whatnot. And that shit costs more money than the THC edibles when you go to a legal state.
Yeah, and that's just
And I find that to be funny.
it is funny.
Because I'm like, why would I pay you $50 for 10 gummies when I can go to Michigan and get the real deal for 15?
Yeah, I could buy like 3 packs of
and
10.
I can use my veterans discount and get 20% off.
And catch them on a buy one, get one free sale.
I know, right?
Anyway.
I can BOGO.
Okay.
All right, enough of that. Now, and plus I've been really good, Dylan.
Yeah, I know.
I've been very sober lately, and I feel fine.
Yeah.
Except when I was with my dad, and I felt like I needed some fucking hard drugs. Then let me tell you, that is one grumpy man.
She needs some methables.
He is something else.
He never turns it off.
He's never not hateful. Can't even enjoy sitting on the beach like beautiful day without grumbling about something.
He's something else, bud.
It's true.
The little bit I've been around
funny.
him, it's just his energy is something special.
My son just laughs at him.
Well, fortunately for Zane, he can ignore most of it.
He gets so tickled and he'll be like, Papa's grumpy. And I'm like, yes, he is. He's the most hateful person. Okay. So finally, after a slow process, Ted agrees to pay Nancy $5,000 for her interest in their house. And she thought it was going to be more like $170,000.
Oh, so this is his offer to buy out her equity in the house.
Yeah.
Well, see, and I don't know about the numbers on this, but that's what equity is, what you could make over the top or what you could borrow against the house. And more than likely, his number might be low, but his number is more than likely closer to the real number than hers.
Well, and after
170.
he spent tens of thousands of dollars paying off her debts and back taxes, that's probably the only amount she would get.
Yes.
And that's probably a generous offer if we really took a hard look at the numbers. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
She was so financially desperate at this point that she agreed to the settlement and assumed full responsibility for her tax debt. In June of 1993, the divorce was finalized. Ted was happy to be free. As we can all imagine, probably have all been there. If you've ever had a nasty breakup, nasty divorce, you're just happy to get the hell out.
Yeah,
right?
Sometimes you're just happy to be out, period, with the clothes on your back.
Like, please, just let me go. But Nancy's life was not improving. Nancy's escort job was on the rocks. Linda and her husband had co-signed on a car loan for a Toyota Camry, which Nancy had defaulted on paying. Linda also found out that Nancy had used her husband John's Social Security number to secure another loan, which she had also defaulted on. On one occasion, Nancy had altered a check that a client had written her for $500 to $5,000. When Linda confronted her, Nancy threatened to expose her to the IRS and to law enforcement. So Linda backed off Nancy. But that was the end of their relationship, both personal and professional.
Oh, my God. It's people like Nancy, the reason you can't even hardly take a check nowadays to a bank and cash it when it's written in your name and you really did earn the money in that check. I mean, this kind of just blatant fraud left and right. All you need is my Social Security number to get a loan? I mean, what the hell? That's crazy.
Wild times.
It was wild times.
But Nancy had already begun committing other crimes. Before she was even divorced from Ted Dillon, Nancy had begun stealing other women's wallets and mail from their boxes. She was cashing their checks, using their credit cards, and making bank withdrawals from strangers' accounts.
It's just the audacity of this person.
Brazen. Nancy had really screwed up her life at this point. She was 45, twice divorced from men who earned more than enough money to live comfortably. She had burned her source of income in Linda. Nancy had no college education, no professional skills, and no real-world work experience, and also a massive addiction. She also had poor impulse control, was volatile at times, and no income. She turned to petty crimes like shoplifting and grand theft, forgery, bank fraud, counterfeiting, and over the next year and a half would be arrested a dozen times, never spending more than a few days in jail. but ended up stealing probably in the ballpark of $25,000 through these like little petty scams and shoplifting and shit.
Okay. That's all she knows, I guess.
The first time she stole a wallet was before she had divorced Ted around Christmas of 1992 while shopping at a mall in Columbia, Maryland. It's funny, I actually have been to that mall multiple times. She took a wallet from the ladies' room, knowing no one would suspect her, as she looked like the other upper-middle-class ladies who were doing their Christmas shopping. She charged a $729 watch to a credit card, a $315 watch on a second credit card, and about $100 in makeup. A few days later, she pawned the watches for much less in Atlantic City. She withdrew $5,200 from the woman's checking account. She also stole a wallet from a woman that was at her daughter's dance studio. And she ended up getting credit cards, bank cards, checks, and a driver's license. She took about $9,000 from that woman's checking account.
Well, you know what? Nancy wouldn't be able to do any of this to me.
She would find out that you're actually in the red like $9.
She's like, when does his paycheck hit so I can maybe get $100 before he pays the bills again? Oh, my God.
This is why I have to just give you an allowance.
What are you talking about? It all goes to bills. Don't do that.
Yeah, and then frivolous spending on things that you don't need.
That's not true. I need every bit of it.
You do not.
I do.
You did not need that 25-gallon foam cowboy hat.
Yes, I did. And the big thumb that says we're number one.
You did not
the
need
big
that
finger.
stuff.
I did need it.
You didn't.
I wasn't even sure who I was cheering for, but I was still representing.
You did not need that Tiger King costume, Dylan.
That's a damn lie.
Put it down. Okay. So, like I said, she ends up with about $9,000 from this woman's accounts.
That's crazy. That's devastate someone.
Nancy was arrested when she tried to take more money from that account. Racking up multiple criminal charges, Nancy would turn on the charm, begging judges for leniency, always avoiding jail time and taking probation instead, which she almost always violated, like within days.
Well, see, then you should go serve your time then. I mean, I thought that's how probation works.
She took to working as a reservation clerk, making about $5 an hour, which was hardly enough to pay restitution on any of this stuff. And the thing is, you know, as part of her probation, Nancy has been ordered to undergo therapy, attend, you know, these Gamblers Anonymous meetings. And, you know, part of the probation as well is that she's not supposed to work in jobs where she handles money.
Yeah.
And things like that. So she keeps getting these little jobs where she's handling cash and violating the probation. Yeah. Nancy's just not learning a lesson from any of this.
Well, no. I mean, obviously the problem in all this is Nancy and her attitude and the way she operates, the way she's wired, because it seems to me like she thinks that everybody else owes her something.
Well, because she's very attractive and well-dressed, and she presents herself very well, people are very surprised when they find out that she's like a grifter.
Yeah, why?
Because she doesn't fit what you
Their
expect.
idea, right.
Exactly. She looks like an upper-middle-class soccer mom.
But, you know, I mean, oftentimes con artists, men and women, are smart, attractive, all that, and they use all that, you know, to disarm people.
And then sometimes they look like Bernie Madoff.
Well, there's that.
Okay. In November of 1994, Nancy met Jack Watkins. She was by then working as a salesperson for Evergreen Memorial Gardens in Finksburg, Maryland. Nancy was essentially selling grave sites, cold calling people, and doing like the door-to-door sales.
Hey, my name's Nancy. Have you ever thought about dying?
Exactly.
Nice. I love cold calls, cold contacts, and sales settings. They're so much fun. It's horrible. Have you ever done it? It's rough.
No, but I mean, we've talked about this before on podcasts. Like, I've worked in communications pretty much my entire adult life. And I've worked at newspapers and magazines. And at one point I worked for a magazine and I did like the business side of things, like manage the office and that type of shit. And the lady that worked with me did sales full time. And she tried to rope me into doing publication ad sales.
Yeah.
Like, oh, well, you can make a big commission. Right.
Right.
And I was like a new mom and like, oh yeah, money. Cool. Tried it for like a week and was like, no, because I can take no for an answer. I don't know how to put on the high pressure sales.
Well, see, that's me is I don't want to. Like, if they're just like, look, this isn't for me.
I don't believe in the product I'm selling. So
Right.
it's really hard for me to be like, it's a great idea for you to buy this $4,000 ad in a magazine that people are going to throw away after they read it. It's a great investment. I mean, no.
I can't. I take no for an answer off the rip, and I can't be pushy.
Yeah,
And
not
it's
for me.
so I guess
don't
that's
have
just
that
not for me.
personality
Right.
at all
Okay.
to do sales. But some people are great at it. And I'm sure all Nancy had to do, I mean, she's already been a good salesperson before. Selling that thing, Dylan, as you would say.
That thing sells itself, baby.
Yeah. So here she is. Let's talk about Jack. He was 74 years old and had only a year earlier had heart surgery. So it was very likely the man described as a simple soul decided to pre-plan his funeral arrangements. Jack wanted an above-ground crypt, having a fear of being buried underground. And he bought what Nancy was selling. Jasper Watkins, as that was his birth name, but he went by Jack, was born March 21st of 1920 in Richmond, Virginia. Little was known about Jack's early life other than he hinted to folks that he came from a well-to-do family and that his father had lost a great fortune during the Great Depression. Jack worked as a grocery clerk before entering the Army during World War II. He worked as a teletype operator during the war and was stationed in India at the time. When he returned home to Maryland, Jack took a job as a supply clerk with Western Auto Supply and lived in Reisterstown, where he eventually met a divorcee named Mary Triplett. Mary was the mother of 4 children by 2 different men. Her parents raised her children while she climbed the corporate ladder, working for an electronics manufacturer. And some might even say that Mary was ahead of her time. She was kind of independent, liberated, working gal, career-minded, not the type to stay at home.
Or work just certain jobs, secretary thing, teacher, stuff like that. She's gonna do whatever she wants, right?
Now, in a strange twist of fate, the father of 2 of her daughters was also murdered, like Nancy's dad, attacked in an alley and left to bleed out.
Oh gosh, like Bruce Wayne's parents.
So exactly.
Jesus.
Jack was a bit of an alcoholic when he met Mary. Not a mean drunk, but like a jolly one. Jack went to work at the same electronics company where his wife was employed, and the couple had a happy marriage for years. In the 1980s, Mary was diagnosed with MS, and eventually she became confined to a wheelchair. Jack quit his job to care for his wife full-time, drawing Social Security along with a small annuity from Western Auto. Mary had bought their home outright with an inheritance from her father, so the couple's expenses were minimal. But Jack loved to socialize, and caring for his disabled wife full-time was an arduous task. He took refuge at the bowling alley, he played bingo, and he loved to sing karaoke. He would go to a senior center where he could hang out with other retirees, make friends. He learned to play electric organ, though not very well, and he enjoyed, like I said, singing. He loved to sing. Mary died in 1989, leaving Jack behind. Now, he dated a woman named Vera briefly, whom he wanted to marry, but that didn't work out. And those who knew Jack said all he really wanted was to be loved.
Well, I would hang out with Jack. Sounds like a fun guy.
Like, he had had this really wonderful marriage to his wife, Mary, and was lonely and really just kind of wanted to be loved and have that kind of love and affection with someone else in his later years.
Yeah, and I think sometimes if the one or the other of the relationship have this medical issue or catastrophic medical whatever in the end of their life, or that strains a relationship too, even if you're both very much in love. Because I think sometimes the one who's doing the caring and stuff feels maybe more like a caregiver than your spouse, and then the one who's unfortunately dealing with all this medical stuff may feel, have their own feelings about the situation. So that's tough on a relationship, I think, definitely.
It is.
Especially when it's prolonged over years. And then you lose the other one, and it's going to leave that hole there. So that's a tough situation.
In 1993, Jack was diagnosed with congestive heart disease and had a valve replacement with an implant. He recovered and began socializing once again. Jack was called an easygoing guy who liked gardening, taking care of plants. He grew a hotbed of vegetables and herbs. He was not very mechanically inclined, noted one of his best friends, a guy named Ralph. And I should tell you a funny story about him. So apparently Jack had a lawnmower and it was giving him trouble and not really working, and he was going to toss it. And his buddy was like, well, let me take a look at it. You may just need to oil it up or replace a blade or whatever. Well, as the guy got into it, he realized there was like a dead rat up in the mower. And it was like clogging the mower. And he was like, this would have been a simple fix had you just basically opened the mower up. And Jack was like, well, I don't know anything about mechanics, so.
It ain't got no gas.
Yeah, kind of. So I thought that was kind of a funny story.
Yeah, but it sounds like he had a green thumb. So, Lord giveth and he taketh away, right?
Exactly. Friends also described him as being naive and trusting to the point of detriment.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
The only reason I say that is because we all know he's going to get a call. He's going to talk to Nancy about death arrangements.
Just wait.
Oh, my God.
After their November business meeting, Jack began telling his friends about a new gal he'd met while grinning from ear to ear. His friends immediately thought this new gal sounded too good to be true. She was way too young for Jack and probably just after his money. While Jack was singing her praises and seemed to have fallen head over heels for the blonde, Nancy had already used his information to open 7 new credit card accounts in his name.
What the hell?
Eventually, Nancy would open 21 accounts using the name Jack Watkins.
So she's already started on him.
Nancy had ended her relationship with Eric Siegel. Eric was trying to get back together with his ex-wife, Faye, and didn't seem interested in rekindling any relationship with Nancy, though she had told him she was dating a John Hopkins doctor, likely to make him jealous, but he wasn't. In 1995...
He didn't care. He's like, get away from me.
Yeah, probably. In 1995... someone obtained a new Social Security card and driver's license for Jack Watkins. Jack's name was also added to a secret P.O. box in Ellicott City, which Nancy had registered. Friends and Jack's stepdaughters didn't have pleasant communications with this Nancy woman. When she answered the phone at Jack's place, she was short with them, often rude. She exchanged no words with Jack's neighbors, who often saw her pulling up into the driveway and checking his mailbox.
Okay.
Well, yeah, she's got to look for those bills she doesn't want him to know about.
Yeah, so okay, yeah. She's keeping all those of the 21 credit card accounts.
And Jack had been really close with Mary's children, his stepdaughters. They would leave messages on his machine, but they would mysteriously be erased. So when Jack stopped returning their calls, it seemed like maybe he didn't want to continue a relationship with these girls anymore, so they just kind of backed off. In May of 1995, Jack and Nancy showed up at a Baltimore BMW dealership, where Jack signed a lease to a brand new 1995 Beamer worth $44,000. Now, his income was around $1,300 a month, but he agreed to make the $680 payments.
Oh my God,
on this lease.
Over half of his income. That's his retirement, annuities, everything together.
Yeah.
So he's not rolling in money.
No. I mean, he has a home that's paid for.
Right.
So his bills are minimal, but Yeah, it's not like this is a wealthy man. Living on a fixed income.
Yeah.
Right. Soon Nancy was buzzing back and forth to Atlantic City, visiting casinos and spending money like crazy. Money which she had acquired through Jack's various credit accounts. She resumed her relationship with Eric after he realized his marriage was truly forever over. On August 10th of 1995, Jack went to a mortgage broker with Nancy to sign papers for a $44,600 mortgage on his home. He had owed nothing, right, before he had met Nancy. Everything was paid for.
Yeah.
Almost all the money that he got from this mortgage, this new mortgage, went to pay off bank loans and credit card debts. Jack willingly signed the papers, even though none of the debts were actually his. And none of the money went to pay off that BMW lease arm, which was already accruing past due bills.
My God, Jack. Poor guy.
And who knows why he did it. But he was on the hook for mortgage payments, which had been left to him. He's got this house left to him debt-free by his former wife. And then now he's going to take on these huge mortgage payments.
Well, no, so he has his home paid for. His bills are minimal. And they're, during this time period, $1,300 a month, it's decent money. So he should be able to live his best retirement life, right? Find someone to spend some time with. You know, if you do rekindle a relationship, great. And together you guys can live a quiet life in retirement. But here comes Nancy, gutting and destroying every opportunity for him to do that. And unfortunately, he's allowing her to do it to him.
Well, as they say, there's no fool like an old fool. And he was a fool in love. An old fool in love.
She'll put that thing on him.
By now, Nancy is cheating on Jack with Eric. The BMW people kept breathing down Nancy's neck, demanding that Jack pay the past due note on this lease. Nancy would claim repeatedly the check was in the mail, or maybe it had been lost. Nancy had a myriad of lies. Jack was sick. Jack was visiting relatives in Virginia. He had had a stroke. He was dying. She would tell the BMW folks she was his daughter, his wife, his girlfriend.
Jesus.
Every time she spoke with creditors, especially the BMW folks, her story changed. Now, eventually, the BMW finance people turned the account over to a collections agency. Meanwhile, the BMW was parked in Nancy's driveway over in Ellicott City, far away from Jack's house where the car was registered. In November of 1995, she convinced Jack to refinance the house once again for $77,000, leaving $20,341 left over from this refi.
Of equity.
Yes.
Available equity.
Somehow she convinced him to sign the money over to her, telling him that she would pay down on her condo over in Ellicott City and that soon Jack could come live with her.
Okay.
Yeah. By early 1996, Jack was anticipating his wedding with Nancy. She kept assuring him they would get married as soon as the arrangements had been finalized. According to the refi agreement, he owed $829.65 a month for the house, which was 60% of his total income. Now, this did not include that BMW lease. So on paper, Jack was completely underwater financially.
Between the car and the mortgage.
Yes. Jack didn't seem to have any idea that he had been wiped out. He never mentioned it to family or friends. All he would say to friends was how Nancy was going to take care of him once they were married. In February of 1996, Nancy called a real estate agent who specialized in distressed properties, offering to sell Jack's home. She told the agent she had power of attorney. The sale would pay off that $77,000 owed and that Jack would net around $4,000.
God.
The deal was set to go through in April. On March 15th, Nancy phoned Jack's longtime doctor to report strange behavior, such as falling down, drinking in excess, that Jack was belligerent and was always complaining about money. The doctor made a note in the file stating that Nancy was the caller and was concerned that Jack might be suffering from dementia. Finally, Jack took Nancy to meet his friends. They had this group they called like the Breakfast Club, and it was a bunch of retirees who met for breakfast. And his friends immediately did not like Nancy. One of his friends warned Jack that Nancy was no good. You should, definitely stay away from this
It's too
woman.
late, bro.
Everyone shared the opinion that Nancy was a gold digger, and they could all see it. Everyone but Jack. He was just absolutely smitten with this younger blonde woman.
Even Jamie Foxx thought she was nothing but a gold digger.
Yep.
My God.
The house finally sold on April 9th of 1996, and Jack cleared around $4,000.
And now he has no home.
The truth about what happened after this is murky, but Nancy said they went to Atlantic City to celebrate. Now, some speculated that Nancy had gotten Jack drunk, abandoned him in Atlantic City, and that somehow he made his way back down to Ellicott City. But anyway, Nancy tried to get him committed for dementia. On April 11th of 1996, she tried checking him into the Howard County General Hospital. He was dizzy, he had slurred speech. He told the medical staff he had gone to Atlantic City to celebrate getting married to Nancy, but she told a different story. Nancy claimed to be his landlady, and any idea of marriage was simply a figment of Jack's imagination.
My God, this bitch. I'm sorry, there's no other word for it. She has bled this man completely dry. Completely. More so than he even probably knows. And now she's setting him up to make it look like he has dementia and she can get him committed and go on a merry way and be done with him?
I'm telling you.
What the freaking hell, dude?
Just wait.
Jeez
you,
Louise.
You ain't heard nothing yet.
Come
Dylan.
on. That's a lot.
Just wait. There's more.
You said this would piss me off.
Jack, I did tell you this. I texted you last night. I was like, this case is going to make you so mad.
Oh, my God.
Jack was making the whole thing up, according to Nancy. For the next 7 days, Jack tried convincing the hospital staff that he was fine. All the while, they didn't believe him, thinking he was just some crazy old man.
That's scary right there. That's one of the scariest settings I could imagine being in, being committed, and you're telling the truth and no one believes you. That's scary to me.
Hospital staff had been convinced that he was an alcoholic, possibly suffering from DTs. He had lost weight and was making up stories. Adult care and nursing home was the only option for a man in Jack's condition. It was opined that Jack had Korsakoff syndrome, which is a kind of dementia and mental deterioration due to alcohol abuse. Nancy enlisted the help of a social worker to confront Jack and let him know that he'd be going to a long-term care facility. And of course, during this meeting, he got very agitated. And who wouldn't? With all the gaslighting, Jack was now beginning to question himself.
Oh, my God.
Right? I mean, he's like, no, we're supposed to get married. I'm fine. But
Yeah.
then now he's like, well, maybe, is there something wrong with me?
Yeah, and everybody's like, oh, just calm down, Jack. Just calm down.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
And noting in the note,
Yeah, what are you writing down?
He's combative and uncooperative.
Seems to be unclear on the events and the truths that have
Oh
happened.
my gosh, this poor guy.
Scary.
This is very scary. He was transferred to the psychiatric ward where Jack continued insisting that he and Nancy were to be married. The problem with the long-term adult care facility was who would pay for it. So no one investigated Jack's annuity, Social Security, or even asked if he had family. I mean, one call to his stepdaughters could have cleared up the situation, but the hospital staff failed him. Eventually, Nancy did a 180 and said she would take him back to her house despite this entire week of protests that she was simply a landlady and couldn't be held responsible for the care of this, troubled old man. It's likely that Nancy worried her ruse would be discovered if she kept pressing this dementia diagnosis.
Right.
That they might catch on or could eventually call one of his relatives or even his family doctor who could have easily cleared this all up.
Yeah, I've not seen any signs of this every time I've examined him, had him at my office.
Nancy took Jack to her condo in Ellicott City, where she devised a plan to literally starve him to death. She kept him overdosed on over-the-counter sleeping pills. Jack wondered when they would be married, and Nancy knew that now she needed to get rid of him because he had served his purpose. Just wait, Dawn. In the early morning hours of May 14th, 1996, a sheriff's deputy named Clark Jackson was patrolling the northwest corner of Loudoun County, where the Appalachian Trail cuts through not far from the Shenandoah River near Harper's Ferry. The officer had passed by a convenience store and turned into this pull-out overlooking the river because he was going to double back and go to the store when he spotted something unusual. It looked like a box. As he got closer, he realized it was more like a trunk in the parking lot area. It was underneath a chain, which secured this certain area that prevented people from walking further into a steep wooded area overlooking the river. It's just pushed up under that chain.
Okay, so it's very odd, in an odd spot.
To find a trunk?
Yeah.
Yeah. When the deputy decided to check it out, he opened the trunk. Inside, he found a duffel bag, which unzipped to another duffel bag. And then inside, there was a body.
It's like a Russian doll of death.
That's what I was thinking. It was the corpse of a small elderly man who was naked from the waist down with a pillowcase over his head. He had been stuffed inside 2 duffel bags and folded into the trunk, which was about 18 inches wide and 2 feet long.
Oh, my God.
It was sealed with some kind of tape. The officer phoned it in. Soon the area was crawling with law enforcement and crime scene analysts. They determined they were likely dealing with a homicide because, let's be honest, there's no way that this elderly man could put himself in the trunk and tape it shut.
Wow, they're astute.
Exactly.
Well, we found his body cut up into 79 pieces. We're thinking somebody else did it. Oh, my God.
Sounds like some law enforcement we've talked about at times. Look, it was obvious
He
that
done shot himself 65 times in the neck.
person had pulled this trunk out of a car and dragged it over to this area, wanting it to be discovered, likely a caregiver. It wasn't a professional hit. Those killers knew how to dispose of a body. This was someone who had known the man and wanted him found, even though maybe they didn't want the burden of dealing with this man's body.
Okay.
Right?
That's a good diagnosis there. I think they're right.
It was very likely dumped by someone who knew the victim. Within a few hours, the body was taken to Leesburg, Virginia, where it was readied for an autopsy. There was no evidence giving up the victim's identity. However, there were certainly signs of a homicide, including dried blood on the back of the head as if someone had clobbered him with a heavy object. There were neck abrasions as if someone had tried to strangle him. The case was a mystery. It would become known as the Jack in the Box case.
No, they can't say that.
Who was this man and who had left him in the trunk?
But they ain't know his name is Jack.
But they will find that out later.
But they've been calling him Jack in the
They
Box.
kept calling him Jack in the Box.
Oh, my gosh. That's sad. For some reason, that strikes me as very sad.
The man was 5'6" and weighed about 111 pounds. There were clear showings of malnourishment to the body along with the head and neck trauma. He had been dead around 48 hours. Rigor mortis was leaving, but decomposition hadn't set in just yet. The autopsy revealed that the man had died from strangulation, cervical compression with hemorrhaging in the neck and the rear of the mouth. The body had a slight amount of beer in, like the toxicology report, and a significant amount of Benadryl, along with a medicine similar to NyQuil in his system. There was also acetaminophen, which all of this mixed together could cause hallucinations and wooziness in a person.
Okay. So basically, it was almost like he was drugged with over-the-counter stuff.
Yes, and it appeared the Benadryl had been administered over a long term, like several weeks, because there was a buildup of it in the man's body. A small amount of nail polish was found on the trunk lid, along with a coarse type of hair, like dog hair. There were also acrylic fibers, probably a blanket or a sweater, and they found a facial tissue with DNA not belonging to the victim in the trunk. The sheriff's office and detective working the case had an artist prepare a sketch to be released to the media in hopes that someone knew the dead man's identity, but when it was released, it got no hits. Park rangers hadn't seen the trunk when they were patrolling the area around 8:30 p.m., but it had been there at 10:30 p.m. Investigators set up a roadblock with a check to ask drivers if they'd been on the road Monday, May 13th between 8:30 and 10:30, because that roadway was like a short trip less than a mile from the bridge over the Potomac to the West Virginia line. So like all traffic had to cross the bridge at some point and pass this like pull-off area.
Okay, so they're
just like desperately trying to figure out who this man is.
well, they're trying everything they can to ID him and get more information on whether someone saw a car pulled over or
Yeah, just
anything
anything.
strange.
Fingerprints from the man, they were able to get fingerprints, and they sent those off to the FBI. Detectives consulted a cardiac surgeon who identified the type of surgical implant, a Duran ring, that was used in the man's heart surgery. And they learned it was manufactured in France, but distributed by Medtronic in the United States. And I want to say Medtronic was like out of the Midwest, like maybe Minnesota, Wisconsin, someplace like that. However, that company wouldn't release information due to HIPAA laws without a court order. Once they were able to get the records, though, there were thousands of patients who had received that type of ring.
So, and I've heard of medical implants being used to ID someone by having like
If it's
just
got like a
a
serial
serial
number.
number. So this is more of a generic implant. That is, you can know what type it is, where it came from.
But doesn't have like a specific serial number.
Okay.
Right. So detectives, I mean, they're trying everything, Dylan. And I have to applaud the folks who worked this case. Like they really, really did everything they could. So detectives gathered a list of heart surgeons in 7 states and sent a letter along with a sketch asking if anyone recognized this man.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Exhausting all avenues, detectives were stumped and the case went cold. Nancy had problems of her own. The rest of 1996, she had money troubles and eventually filed for bankruptcy under Chapter 7 with debts a little over $21,000. This was her second bankruptcy in a dozen years. The BMW was now in repossession and the insurance policy was canceled, but Nancy didn't care because it wasn't her name on the lease. The car was simply parked in her driveway at this point.
So she still had the car.
Yeah.
Wow.
By September, Nancy had rerouted Jack's Social Security checks to her address in Ellicott City. She signed the checks and either cashed them or deposited them into her account. Nancy would sometimes use her daughter's names to co-endorse the checks without their knowledge. After the second bankruptcy was finalized, she opened a new P.O. box and had the checks sent there. Nancy inquired about Jack's annuity with New York Life and wanted to see if she could convert the account to cash instead of getting like a monthly check.
Oh, she should have called J.G. Wentworth.
But it didn't work out. Nancy had also made herself a signatory on an account that Eric had opened that year. And so now she's with Eric. He will later claim that between 1997 and 2003, Nancy scammed nearly $300,000 from him.
Okay.
By late 1997, Nancy was back to her old tricks of raiding mailboxes. She found pre-approved credit card offers mailed to her neighbor, and she was able to get blank checks and credit cards from 3 banks and several stores in her neighbor's name. Eventually, the neighbor found a bill and reported it as fraud. The phone number matched Nancy Jean Schweitzer, the woman's neighbor. The number that had been used to open the account.
What would you do? Would you go put hands on that bitch?
I would probably walk up to somebody and, yeah, probably. Well, I'd first laugh and be like, good luck trying to get something in my name.
Yeah.
Because I'm married to Dylan.
I was only pre-approved for $300, bitch. The joke's on you. And the interest rate sucks. You're going to make people think we're losers.
You're the one that's already done that. I said
I
because-
didn't do
said-
none of that. I ain't done none of that, bro.
I said because I was married to you.
Yeah, I know. So, you're making me look like a loser. That's hilarious. I'm not a loser. I still haven't quite recovered from an insane ex and all my shit being liquidated and
You're a bad
set
bitch.
on
You're a
fire.
bad bitch. You had a bad breakup. Is what you're saying.
That's right.
You still a bad bitch.
I am.
Okay. An investigator pulled up Nancy's arrest records and criminal history in Maryland, finding a long list of credit card frauds. A search warrant was issued, and Nancy's house, that she now shared with Eric, was raided on January 20th of 1998 in Laurel, Maryland. Nancy was there with her daughters while this raid happens. However, nothing was found. Not a shred of evidence about the fraudulent credit cards, the checks. But on the way out of the door, the investigator spotted the BMW and asked for the keys. Inside, the detective found checks in the neighbor's name.
Nice.
Now, the car was registered to Jack Watkins. It could be possible that this Jack Watkins was the grifter. There was no way to prove it was Nancy, even though they knew it was her because she had these charges and...
Yeah, well, I mean, you look at her criminal history.
But they knew they couldn't directly tie it. There was a possibility it could be this other person, so it's kind of circumstantial at this point.
So now they're like, who's this Jack Watson guy?
Yeah. And there was no way to prove that it was directly Nancy that had stolen from the neighbor. Now, Nancy immediately calls a lawyer friend that she knew through Gamblers Anonymous, and he told her he could help her work out a deal to avoid jail time, like if there were going to be criminal charges, if she agreed to pay some restitution. Eric agreed to cover the bill if it meant that Nancy would avoid prison time.
Why, Eric? Seriously. She's sucking you dry, too. Not even in the good way.
Well, maybe she's doing that too, Dylan.
I know she is. That's why these dudes is like, okay, Nancy. God damn it, man.
The state's attorney would consider it depending on how many frauds she had committed, and they would work out the details. So the state's attorney, this detective, and Nancy's attorney friend are trying to kind of see if they can come up with some sort of deal. BMW is still trying to find Jack Watkins. So a few days after the raid, the car magically turned up on the lot where it had been leased.
Really?
Nancy could say that Jack had picked up the car and it would show he was alive and well.
Damn, she's pretty damn cunning in some ways.
The art of being a con is always having a plausible story on hand, Dylan. See, that's the part you're missing.
Oh, I can do this stuff.
You're not a very good liar either.
I can lie if I need to.
No, you can't.
You're a damn lie. And you're telling it right now.
You're a damn lie. That's what you always say when you're lying.
That's not true.
It's true.
You can blame some dumbass friend of ours for ever saying that is the truth. But they were tired of me calling out people when they were a damn lie.
You're a bad liar.
All right.
I always know when you're telling me not the truth.
Well, you know what? I'm going to swindle you out of all your money next.
You already have.
It's just called us paying our bills.
Whatever. I can't trust you at all. You'll go run up my damn bar tab or something.
You're not telling the truth.
See, you were going to say it because you're the damn lie. Okay. Now, in April of 1998, Nancy sat down with the investigator and her attorney to try and work out a deal on this fraud. It was during this meeting that the BMW came up, and Nancy had a bunch of excuses as to why she was driving Jack's car, none of which made sense to the detective. Nancy explained he was a gambling addict and an alcoholic. Why he also had a lot of indebtedness, because at this point, the cop had looked into this guy and had seen that his credit was ruined and he owed all this money everywhere. And she said she didn't know where he was living, maybe Virginia. The investigator pressed her about whether she had ran up his debts. And she denied this. However, with Nancy's track record, the state's attorney was not willing to play ball and make up some deal, even if Eric promised to pay restitution on her behalf. So the case was sent to court. There were 91 counts of fraud.
Wow.
The state decided to convene a grand jury to probe all of Nancy's misdeeds. In December of 1998, Nancy and Eric took out a marriage license. This guy.
Is this so they couldn't be forced to testify against each other?
I don't know. Maybe they were just in love.
I don't know if you call it love. And then you still got these investigators got to be thinking, who's this Jack guy? Where's he at? You know what I mean?
So after the marriage license, Nancy opened up even more accounts in Eric's name without his knowledge. Bills were piling up in Nancy's name, along with her daughter Amanda, Eric's name, and Jack. And these bills were all piling up at her P.O. box. Nancy would check the mail and immediately toss them all in the trash. She continued depositing Jack's checks into her account.
So she's still collecting his annuity and Social Security checks.
Yup. On February 17th of 2000, Nancy was indicted by a Howard County grand jury on 3 counts of felony scheme involving a continuing course of conduct. Bail was set at $150,000, and she faced up to 4 years in prison. Someone put up the money to get her out of jail, most likely her now husband, Eric, who went by Rick. Eric hired a high-profile attorney who once defended Spiro Agnew. The guy's name was Harold Glazer. I guess kind of a big to-do Baltimore attorney. In the end, Glazer filed a shit ton of motions and Eric offered to pay restitution. So eventually Nancy settled with a plea agreement. She was given 5 years probation, which ran concurrent with her already 10-year probation sentence from previous convictions.
So she's getting this deal when she's already on probation.
Yeah.
And any of this, even if she pleads guilty to a single count, would technically be violating her existing probation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, the justice system has definitely failed in this.
No, in this case, it's
Instance.
the injustice system.
A new detective felt compelled to take over the Jack in the Box case and contacted the producers of America's Most Wanted. The trunk case was featured on an episode. This investigator then contacted Unsolved Mysteries. The new investigator, her name was Oxman, she thought whoever killed the old man was running some kind of social security scheme.
Ah, she's good.
She learned of a fingerprint database ran by INS and would run the victim's prints up there and with APHIS, but there were no matches. She decided to go back to the FBI and check the civil and applicant databases. So like anybody who had ever applied for a job. This also included military fingerprints, which had now, like initially they were not all in the system, but now they've all been loaded into this database, all military prints. So finally, the fingerprints came back to an Army veteran named Jack Watkins, who had served during World War II.
See, I was wondering when that was going to pop up, but then you pointed out, as these systems grew and you got better, whole different groups would load all their fingerprints, which you're talking about from analog to digital, a very tedious process.
Right, and so we're going from like the 90s when this murder took place into the 2000s when people were finally getting up to speed with technology. She was able to obtain his social security number and saw that he was collecting benefits with checks being mailed to a P.O. box in Ellicott City, Maryland.
And she said, aha.
Yep, because Jack had been stuffed in a trunk for nearly 7 years. So who was collecting the benefits?
Very good. Man, she's good. She's not playing around.
Yeah, and her story's kind of interesting. Like, she didn't start out as a detective. I think she started out as a teacher and had kind of like lived in various places, and she had helped someone on some kind of case, like tracking someone down, and realized she had really amazing detective skills and decided kind of late in life to become a police officer and a detective.
Women make great investigators and detectives.
Yeah,
They do.
Her story is pretty interesting. But, okay, back to our story. So the Social Security Administration assigned an investigator named Sean Stevenson and a U.S. Postal inspector named Mark Carr, along with FBI agents and Virginia State Police to this case. The postal inspector learned the P.O. box was registered to a Nancy Jean Schweitzer. And it didn't take much effort for this team of investigators to uncover Nancy's checkered history of bank and credit card fraud. A credit check showed Jack Watkins had 26 accounts, all but 5 opened after 1994. 2 of those had been opened after his body was discovered in the trunk. The post office was placed under surveillance, and sure enough, Nancy showed up to collect Jack's check. She even tossed the empty envelope from Social Security into the trash at the post office.
So that's her habit. She just rips it open, grabs a check out, throws it away, doesn't think twice.
Yep. She was then trailed to the First United National Bank branch where she tried to deposit the check. And the clerk denied her this because there was suspicious activity on the account, likely where the FBI had pulled the banking information.
Oh, yes.
So they were like, oh, there's suspicious activity. We can't deposit that check right now or cash it for you. 4 days later, a woman pretending to be Jack's daughter called the Social Security Administration saying the check was lost. The callback number was for Nancy Jean Schweitzer Siegel, who was now residing in Pikesville, Maryland. 72 checks had been sent to Jack Watkins, and at least half of them were co-endorsed by Nancy. About half had been deposited into 4 different accounts linked to Nancy, and the others had been cashed just, for pocket money. It was around $90,000 total since Jack's body had been discovered. She had also deposited about $10,000 worth of annuity checks into her bank accounts. These were all federal crimes.
Oh, yeah, you got all kinds, including mail fraud.
The telephone call reporting the lost check was considered wire fraud, and there was no federal statute to cover murder, but tampering with a witness by way of murder could alone get Nancy the death penalty if it could be proven that she strangled Jack in order to prevent him from reporting her frauds to law enforcement, and if she had planned to murder him.
Wow.
I hope that's not a murder.
I hope it's not a murder either, because they just rolled 75 pieces of emergency equipment around
They
us.
do that if somebody sneezes in this town. Or
Man, I'm telling you what, we lack infrastructure, we lack a nightlife or things for young people to do. But one thing we have in this county is emergency medical fucking equipment, people.
And we'll roll the fire truck for everything.
We roll the fire truck for everything.
And we live near a fire station, so we have to hear it. So if you're picking it up on the podcast, that's what we're talking about. If it's not picking up on the mics, they're like, what the fuck are they talking about?
Yeah,
Okay, anyway.
It was loud.
Okay. So Nancy's home was finally wiretapped along with her phones, and they were able to determine who Nancy was calling for a period of 60 days. The postal agent wanted to confront Nancy and see how she would react. So he called her and said, you need to come to the post office and update your mailbox application. So while she's there updating this, she added Jack Watkins to the application. And when this postal inspector asked Nancy, who's Jack Watkins, she said it was her father. She admitted to receiving mail for a dead man. The next Social Security payment wasn't delivered on purpose, and it took her nearly a month to call the Social Security Administration. She asked for another check to be sent, and when she got it, Nancy cashed it. Now they had 2 counts of wire fraud. Finally, with warrants in hand, the investigators found her at the post office, again, as she's collecting a check.
Damn it.
And asked to speak with her. So they pull her aside into another office area, and they told her they had concerns about Jack Watkins' Social Security checks, and that's why they needed to talk to her.
Man, I'm telling you what, people might think it's a joke to get pulled into a room at the post office. It's not. It's serious business.
Has this happened to you before?
No, but just if it's went this far and the postmaster general,
and they gave you a full body cavity search.
Well, no,
and then later you found out it wasn't really a postmaster at all.
Well, no, that happens out in the lobby.
You were just role playing.
What is wrong with you?
I don't know.
It's a big deal. And these people do have very, very, very much power.
No one bought me a pony when I was a kid.
And a lot of people do not realize that. Because typically right behind the postmaster general is going to be the FBI.
Yep.
It's not a game.
You don't want your wanted poster hanging in the post office.
Oh, man, that'd be awesome. if you could pay like a donation and get like an Old West one done and put up.
Bang.
Pew pew.
Yeah, we need to get you like one of those old timey portraits where you're dressed like a cowboy, and we'll get the wanted frame around it.
I wanted to have the garter on, showing my garter belt
You should get that.
with the dress.
Yeah, you'd be a really sexy flapper girl.
I've been told that more than once.
You've got nice legs. They're very womanly.
It's
They're
not
very
true.
shapely and feminine.
They're big and muscular looking. I don't know what women legs you looking at. My legs is like that.
Maybe I like women who are power lifters.
Okay.
Don't shame me.
So basically what you're saying is I can take over the women's weight class in powerlifting.
Okay, let's get back to this.
Okay.
So she admitted that her duty was to regularly check Jack's mail as a favor. She admitted several checks had to be reissued and that she had called about them, which basically is Nancy admitting to wire fraud. She told investigators that Jack was living somewhere in Pennsylvania and had been there for about 6 years. He was living with a woman named Ruth. She said she had had no contact information for Jack or Ruth, but explained that she met them at a rest stop along the highway after cashing the checks.
This is why wouldn't you just have the check come to his house? It's stupid.
Well, she told investigators it was because Jack owed all of these debts and he couldn't have a bank account because he was afraid his money would be seized to cover some of the debts he had.
Right.
Because
Well,
he's a gambler. And I mean, she's got a story for everything.
if they can seize your Social Security for anything, which I don't know that they even can, honestly, for debts, they would just take it from straight from the government. They would garnish your Social Security check. I mean, come on, dude.
Look.
She what it is, she's running out of room. She's finally running out of track. Surely.
When investigators asked her if she was taking any of Jack's money, she said, quote, Jack is getting all of his money.
I even put an extra 25 to make sure he can buy some some butterscotch candy because he loves
Werther's
it.
Originals.
Yeah, the strawberries,
The little strawberries.
old people candy.
Those old people candy.
It's good.
The
though.
circus peanuts.
Yes.
Does anybody eat those besides like old people?
What about the caramels with the whiteness in her?
Okay, no, I love those.
Okay,
You don't?
I love them. I love all those candies. I'm not a big butterscotch fan, must say.
I like the butterscotch. I'm not a big fan of the strawberries, and I don't like the circus peanuts.
You shut your damn mouth. I'm not okay. The circus peanuts are weird texture.
I'm not really into marshmallowy candy.
Yes.
Okay.
I
guess
agree with
it's my
that.
thing.
I like the strawberries. I'm
Do
sorry.
you?
I love them. It's like a real little strawberry in there. Even the package
It
looks
reminds
like
me
a
of
strawberry.
those shitty like Luden's children's cough drops that you would eat when you were a kid because they taste good and they weren't really effective cough drops.
Oh, you're saying shitty because they're not effective cough drops.
Yeah.
But they taste great. Luden's cherry, bud.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
It's just too sweet.
It's the best.
I think that's why I don't like those strawberries. It's just a little too sweet or something.
Okay.
Okay, moving along. So, believing she could outwit the investigators, Nancy spoke openly with them and even invited them back to her house. She told them she had to relieve her daughter of babysitting duty, but that they could come back to her house and she would talk to them some more. So, back at her house, Nancy continued answering questions while watching her grandson. Finally, the agents admitted who they were: FBI and Loudoun County Sheriff's deputy, and the jig was up. Everyone knew the truth about Jack. They knew, Nancy knew, and it was time to come clean.
Oh, wow.
Nancy said as long as they didn't take her grandson, she would cooperate. She was really concerned that they were going to like take her grandson and put him into foster care. And she was like begging them, like, let me call my daughter to come from work and pick up her child. You know, so she's like freaking out about the grandchild and won't cooperate until they do something with this kid. So while she's sitting there, they show her a photo of the trunk and its contents. So crime scene photos. And Nancy began to cry and say she had ruined her family. And that's when the phone rang. Nancy snapped to, brimming with happiness and charm, answering the call. And the investigators were just stunned at her instant change in demeanor. She's telling her husband, Eric, everything is fine. Never mentions, like, I've got FBI here at the house.
Yeah,
He's out of town on a business trip. I believe he was in Florida on business. And she's just like, hey, hon, oh, everything's great. Oh, yeah, I've got little Jimmy or whatever the grandson's name. Everything's great. And these investigators are like, what the fuck? She just went from like boo-hoo-hooing, right? To like instant change in personality. Because she's sociopath.
Yeah, definitely.
Right. A search warrant was executed where they found hairs from Nancy's dog, which matched the ones on the trunk, along with nail polish. Now, later, when they questioned her, Amanda, Nancy's daughter, admitted to owning a trunk just like the one in the pictures and said she had used it for steadying her toenails when she had painted them.
Wait a second. She still got the same nail polish from some years ago?
No, she's saying, because remember there was nail polish.
Right.
Right. So, but well, they do have some nail polish that is like the same color as what had been on the trunk.
Oh my gosh.
Well, they were even like, why would she hang on to the same nail polish for 7 years?
For 7 years, exactly.
Right. So they don't know if she just bought the same color or what. But they did find a match to this. But I mean, if it was something like red, the really common color. Right?
Well, okay.
But her daughter is admitting, like, I had a trunk just like that one. And I used to paint my toenails on top of it, which would account for the paint on the top of the trunk.
Okay.
Amanda told them that her mother said that Jack had went to live with his sister in Virginia and had taken the trunk with him.
Yeah, Jack and the trunk are together.
So her daughter Jennifer, when Jack had come to her Ellicott City condo, her older daughter Jennifer was already like out on her own, mother, whatever. And Amanda was in college. So Amanda did briefly remember this elderly man being at their house. And so when she asked about him, oh, well, he left and he took your trunk.
Yeah, I just gave him your trunk.
Yeah. Nancy went to her attorney, Howard Glazer's office, on August 6th, 2003. She was very upset, throwing up. A day or so later, she attempted suicide, trying to overdose on pills. She was hospitalized, released. On Friday, August 15th, Nancy was arrested on fraud and theft charges. She was taken to jail. It would be the last time she would ever see freedom. Her husband, Eric, was called to testify before a grand jury, and he was cleared as a suspect because initially they thought he had to be involved.
Yeah, well, part of that is probably Nancy's size. Here you have this trunk, even though she'd starved to poor Jack down to, around 100 pounds, you still got a trunk with a 100-pound man in it, so it's going to be in the neighborhood of, who knows, 150, 60 pounds. So it's going to be hard for her to manage this, right? Stuffing him in the bags. So I think at first in the investigators' minds, that's what they were thinking. She had to have help. And that's why the trunk was no further than that chained barrier there, because I think she literally backed up to that spot, had just enough oomph in her to get it over the lip of the trunk and just plop it out on the ground.
Probably.
She couldn't take it any further.
Well, he was cleared as a suspect, and the government soon realized Eric was one of Nancy's biggest victims, besides Jack Watkins, because she had taken out about $300,000 from him. On August 27th of 2003, the grand jury returned a 17-count indictment against Nancy, charging her with multiple counts of bank fraud, wire fraud, theft, and identity theft. Missing was any implication that Nancy had murdered Jack Watkins. The indictment charged that Nancy had cultivated a relationship with the elderly man in order to gain his trust and access to his financial information to further a scheme. She had isolated Jack from his family and friends, and that she had portrayed herself as Jack's girlfriend at times. She had furthered this scheme after his death by collecting his Social Security checks and depositing them into accounts that she controlled. She could be looking at a total of 73 years in prison. And at age 55, she would likely serve at least 10 to 15 years at minimum for these charges. So a lot of people were saying, well, she may not even make it out of prison.
Yeah, but there's no murder charge.
Wait.
Okay.
There's more, Dylan.
Good.
We're not done. This is Mountain Murders. If you ain't getting 2 hours out of us, we're going to leave you satisfied.
Ooh.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're going to finish you off right now.
There was likely a superseding indictment as the government was still investigating Jack's death and whether Nancy had murdered him to further her scheme. One thing was true, Dylan. Nancy was fucked.
Yeah, it sounds like the chickens have finally come home to roost. This is Nancy's day of reckoning, right?
The damn chickens is shitting all over Nancy right now. Okay,
Then some soiled doves over your head right now.
something. These are some shitbirds, and they are letting loose.
That's what it is.
Nancy's friend told investigators that that Nancy had claimed that Jack had hung himself in the Ellicott City condo.
Okay.
So one of her friends came forward and said Nancy had found this old man hanging, and she flipped out and disposed of his body. And her daughter Jennifer later said her mother told a similar story, that she had found him dead by suicide and put him in the trunk. Of course, if he killed himself, Nancy would not be criminally responsible for witness tampering.
No, at most, what? What is that charge when you don't do the proper thing of reporting a death and the remains, like abuse of a corpse or something like that? She might get that charge, but not the murder charge.
Yet, the autopsy had shown no signs of hanging, no ligature marks around the neck. Nancy's behavior toward her attorney became erratic, and he ordered a mental evaluation. She kept accusing her attorney of conspiring with her husband, Eric, like against her, and that they both wanted her to die when she had attempted to overdose.
Okay.
And the attorney's like, yeah, we're actually the ones who took you to the hospital, so that's not the case. But she's just being very erratic, volatile.
Well, the mask's been pulled back. She has no control over anything. She thought she was smarter than everyone, including the investigators, and it's not true. And she has nowhere to turn now, so it doesn't surprise me she's lashing out at everyone around her.
Well, it seemed the lawyer might have been trying to lay the defense or like the groundwork for a mental disease or defect defense. However, she was found competent to stand trial once given a mental evaluation, even though they determined she had some mental illness.
Yeah, the psychologist was reading the report. He's like, Your Honor, although she is a spiteful bitch who doesn't care for anyone but herself, she is able to stand trial.
Yes, pretty much. Then in January of 2004, a superseding indictment was handed down, charging her with 22 criminal counts, including the witness tampering allegation.
Now, the superseding indictment, is this one that would have prominence over any previous indictments? Ah, interesting. I've never heard that exact term. Okay.
Yeah, so if you go like before a grand jury or something and they indict you, if there are other charges floating out there, they can always come back and charge you with more. Like more serious charges.
Right.
So that's what they did. It was a 37-page indictment.
Wow. It wasn't, the first one was 70 or 90 some counts with the fraud and all that stuff?
Oh, that was back when she had stolen the credit cards from her neighbor.
Oh, my gosh.
There's been so many, Dylan.
I can't even keep track of her. I cannot believe this woman has done this to so many people over so many years. And, like, at what point do you just stick her in jail for 4 or 5 years, let her think about it? I mean, she's made it all this time.
If you're attractive and well-dressed and well-spoken, you can get away with a lot of shit.
Yeah, because you're devastating those people when you do that. It's such a mess you create.
So like I said, it was a 37-page indictment, which is huge. If found guilty, Nancy could get the death penalty because of that witness tampering charge. And guess what? Nancy pleads not guilty.
I don't know what everybody's talking about.
It took nearly 6 years to convict Nancy Siegel. In 2009, at age 61, Nancy was found guilty and given 400 months in prison, a 33-year sentence for the murder and fraud scheme. The jury deliberated for only 7 hours. Nancy's horrendous life of con games and murder was finally over. In the 2-week-long trial, testimony showed Nancy engaged in decades of long fraud schemes where she obtained hundreds of thousands of dollars illegally through fraud and theft. Now 74, Nancy is due to be released in 2032. She is serving her sentence at the high-security prison Hazleton in Preston County, West Virginia.
Damn. They finally caught up to Nancy.
They finally caught up to Nancy.
Man,
poor Jack's identity finally discovered.
So disrespectful.
And they were finally, they were able to finally lay him to rest and give his stepdaughters and friends some answers.
Stuffed in a treated like that, and leading up to his death, and then it sounded. I think he was killed. She finally had enough of him, and blunt force trauma or something like that, or smothered something, and stuffed in duffel bags and then into a trunk. I mean, it's just horrific, very disrespectful.
And then continue to cash his checks.
And that's what I was thinking.
Like, so disgusting.
What kind of monster?
That's why I'm like, she's a brand new level of shitbird that we're bringing to Mountain Murders.
What kind of monster can you be to know that you use this man up like this, dispose of him like trash, and then every single month go get a check with his Social Security check with his name on it and cash it and spend it? I mean, what a piece of shit. She is the queen shitbird.
She is a queen
It'll
shitbird.
be a long time before she's dethroned, usurped by a newer, bigger, better shitbird.
Well, at this point, she's 74, and she still has about 10 years left on her sentence. So
maybe it was a death sentence.
she may not make it out of prison.
She doesn't deserve to be out of prison, in my book.
She doesn't, but look at the long-term damage. I mean, not only did she murder this man, but look at the damage she's done to her family, to her kids,
Oh, yeah.
her ex-husbands,
There's still people living.
strangers that she put through financial ruin.
Yeah, there's still people out there right now dealing with what she did to them. I guarantee it. Because that kind of stuff, I know from personal experience, and it was nothing like this. Takes years and years and years to even start getting recovered or going back to where you can say you've recovered from it. Let alone if someone runs up $100,000 a high interest rate debt in your name, you know what I mean? Jesus. Wow. Okay. So you said you've known, I thought you had just found this case. You've actually known of this case for quite some time. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
I remember this case when it was still an unsolved case.
When Jack in the Box,
Yes.
I hate that term, honestly. But when they were still trying to figure out the identity of the poor old man in the trunk.
Yes.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, because, it was on Unsolved Mysteries.
Right.
America's Most Wanted.
And you were familiar with the area where a lot of this happened?
Yeah, I mean, I've talked about it before, but I lived in, Laurel, Maryland. I was stationed at Fort Meade, so I'm very familiar with the Baltimore area, right? And I've been to Harper's Ferry. I know the exact location of this bridge and the pull-off. I drove through there because I'm a bit of a dark tourist. I
You
drove
are.
through there once and pulled over at this area and was like, oh, this is where they found the body in the trunk. Yeah.
Wow.
I'd be doing weird shit like that.
Okay, so interestingly enough, while we're doing this long episode, thank you for this episode. We needed
You
this.
are welcome.
We needed this good episode. It's tragic.
Sorry I was a little tongue-tied, okay? Getting back into the groove.
We are.
And also, I'm battling like a little stuffy something going on. I feel like I have like a really dry throat. And I keep being like, blah, 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 because I need to drink something. Sorry.
So this was a long episode, and I do thank you for that. We are here at the Mountain Murder Studio trying to get back in the groove so we can get back to what we used to do. Okay, folks?
Yeah, we've been locked out of our Instagram account. As you know, there is no more Mountain Murders podcast on Instagram. Well, there is, but we can't access that. I have created a brand new account. Find us at Appalachian True Crime.
Nice.
And you can follow us there. I will be posting some photos of Nancy.
Yes, and you can follow us on all the other social medias that you can think of. The old TikToks, we're there. Heather's there performing, right?
Yes, unlike you, I don't have performance anxiety.
Yeah, and I'm just fat. And if you would like to find more content, ad-free and extra content, you can join the rest of our incredible patrons at patreon.com/mountainmurderspodcast and find all kinds of extra content.
It's true. Last week, we dropped a full episode on the Edgecombe County serial killer out of North Carolina.
That was a wild story.
It was a pretty interesting case. A little-known serial killer who preyed on women around the Rocky Mount area of North Carolina off of I-95.
Yeah, and we took a break in the middle of this, so on these long ones we had to walk around a little bit, stretch our butt muscles. And Heather realized that she Someone attempted to scam Heather in the middle of us recording this episode. She was sent a notice that her social security number was going to be canceled.
It was actually sent to the Mountain Murders Podcast at gmail.com address.
No.
And the email was like 2 Mountain Murders, right? Instead of like a first name. It was like 2 Mountain Murders. Your social security number will be canceled. You need to contact us. And it had like a link to click.
Click the link.
Yeah.
You need to find out more information.
And it was like really poorly worded.
Because
it was maybe someone who, like, maybe English wasn't their first language had written this. There was bad grammar in the spellings. Yeah,
man, those
it was
are
pretty funny. I started laughing when I read it.
Those are so cute,
I was like,
especially
"Aw."
with the broken and poor English in it.
Please cancel me.
Whose social security number gets canceled? What the fuck is that?
And this whole time I've been trying to fake my death and like live a new identity, one with better credit,
yeah, I know, right? Okay.
one without student loans.
Mm-hmm. All right. Until next time, everyone just stay safe.
Stay jiggy with it. Nah, 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 nah.
And keep being cool.
But more importantly, get jiggy with it. Nah, 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 nah.
You got to stop.
Am I
doing
not
that.
going to make jiggy happen today?
Not that way.
Okay, fine.